Welcome everyone to this meeting of the working group on contributing MicroJIT to the OpenJ9 project. Today is November 19th, 2020. Before anything else, I would like to announce that starting today, I will be chairing these meetings. So we'll use my WebEx handle, unless otherwise specified, of course. I shared with you a small agenda for this instance, agenda that is covering 3 items. So linkage integration progress, J profiling, the PR progress, and then there is any other business as usual. So does anybody want to add another item to the agenda? Is there anything else in particular to be discussed today?
Okay. It should be good, yeah.
Okay, so then let's start with the first item, linkage integration progress. Harpreet, would you want to start? An update, please?
Yeah, of course. I have made some changes to the OMR for refactoring the linkage properties. So that was just like segregating the properties from the linkages. So I'll be putting up a PR in open for review by the IBM team, and please note that it has been tested for the 64-bit, but I'm yet to test it for the 32-bit. So I'll be working next on testing it for the 32-bit builds because I'm not yet successful in building the OpenJ9 in 32-bit. So I guess this is all for me.
So you're planning to build, if I remember correctly, using Win32 rather than Linux 32, right?
Yeah, Win32 to be more exactly.
Yeah. I don't know the reason for that. Why picking Windows as opposed to Linux? I'm sure there's a specific reason, but do you know?
Just that I got some guidelines from Daryl that it is possible in like using the Windows. So I just wanted to give it a try. No other specific reason.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is a document which says that we can do that using the 32-bit in Windows. So for the Linux, I did not get any documentation, any pointers or something like that. So that is the only reason, nothing else.
Okay, so we do have some documentation on how to build Win32. Okay.
Yeah, there is some documentation on that.
Okay, sounds good. So will you be creating the PR before testing Win32 or after?
Yeah,
ideally after.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm just thinking of making a WIP PR.
Okay.
So that so that something is up for review until I'm simultaneously working on the 32-bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, so I'll be doing that. I'll be opening the PR as soon as possible, and I'll let it know through maybe Slack channel. So most probably through this the MicroJIT Slack channel, I'll let others know about that.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, so that is more or less me regarding the first agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Harpreet. So the
Okay.
next the next item is J profiling. Scott, I guess you'll take that one.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marius. So on J profiling, I've been going through some of the code. Previously, Andrew mentioned that I could create possibly some empty blocks or empty CFG nodes. I've been kind of looking through and trying to see how that could be done and if it's possible. So it seems like there is some mechanism for creating empty blocks, but it looks like it's expecting TR treetops for describing the entry and exits. And I'm wondering if there's a way for me to ensure that I can correctly create all the required edges and links without creating treetops, or if there is a way to create empty treetops, and confirm that that won't suddenly render all the profiling data inaccessible to when TR tries to get it.
Okay, so that will be a question for somebody from the optimizer team. Maybe Rahil, you may be working with trade-offs, more or less.
Yeah, I need to take a look how that is done. Yeah, I'm not pretty clear right now how to create empty blocks without treetops, or without empty treetop with empty treetops. So a small question: you are creating the control flow graph, and I guess the reason behind doing that would be to put the frequency counters, I guess. Is it correct?
Yeah, that's more or less what we're trying to do. We're trying to reuse as much as possible from the J profiling block and J profiling value, and the objective is for me to be able to create an empty CFG, empty in the sense that it doesn't have treetops or any IL inside it. And then that's kind of step one, is can I get JProfile to recognize a CFG from MicroJIT, because MicroJIT doesn't have an IL. So can I create a CFG that doesn't have IL in it that the JProfiler can work with? That's step one. And then step two is inside of JProfile, or the JProfiler and JProfiling value and JProfiling block, there's sections of code which assume that it's working with TR, which is not an unreasonable assumption for it to make at this point. But it assumes it's working with TR, and it just makes the calls in line to add in the counters. And the second step is then to perform some amount of refactoring so that it knows how to add the counter and then calls the appropriate thing. So right now, I think where we've kind of landed is either moving that code out to a static function and then just putting an if block in there, check to see if we're compiling a microjitted method somehow. And if we are compiling a microjitted method, call an equivalent code insertion thing for microjit. And if we're not, then call the function that did what previously was inlined. Another option would be to maybe pass the appropriate function in when we call, because when this JProfiling block perform call is made, it's going to be made by one of the compilers, and the compilers already know whether you're compiling with microjit or not. So we could pass in a pointer to the function that needs to be called in the inline section. And then the call can just be made that way, and that might clean up a lot of it. So we're kind of, and this is probably more general in that it's a code styling question for OpenJ9 developers in general, but the Pimple implementation means not adding any logic inside of the JProfiler to figure out what it needs to call and whether it's being called from microjit or TR. But the other side of that is probably what I've seen a lot more of floating around OpenJ9 code as I'm trying to understand it and read it.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the way you distinguish between the microJIT and the regular one does, I guess, boil down to the coding style. In effort to get the JIT profiling working, at least for the block frequency counter, you do need to have some sort of a CFG so that it can figure out which path it needs to put a counter. I guess, yeah, and I don't think so. You need I need to I think we can avoid having a CFG for the J profiling value because what it is doing is just profiling the value. That's pretty much it. So I don't think so you need a control flow for that. If you identify the value that you want to profile, you can just put templated code there for profiling.
Okay. I know block profiling is like one of the things that we really need, and then
Yeah.
the value profiling was kind of like a secondary thing that we wanted. But it's good that that might be easier and that we might not need the CFG for value profiling. Yeah. So when 2 weeks ago when we were discussing this, we were talking about how we could create an empty, or we were saying that we would need to create some sort of profiling control flow graph, and then we were going over kind of how the J profiling block works. So what I'm trying to do right now at this point is basically figure out how the control flow graph works. So I can figure out essentially how much functionality, if any, I need to add in order to allow the J profiler to walk a CFG that's really just a facade of the structure of the code. It doesn't have any IL in it, and it can't have any actions performed on the trees that are inside it.
No, what it does is it just analyzes the control flow graph and try to identify try to minimize the counters that it is support. And I guess the algorithm is the heart of that code, which can be common for both. So yeah.
So for the treetops, have you looked at the constructors? I'm sure we have maybe more than one constructor, and maybe one of them will suit our needs.
Yeah, so I've looked at, I was trying to find out exactly which treetop is being used, because I believe that the treetop is an extensible class, and I've kind of been trying to pin down exactly where the treetops are generated and how they work, because going through IL gen and going through IL, I didn't see a J9 treetop. So I'm still looking for exactly where the constructors that are used by J9 for making treetops are, whether they're the OMR treetops or whether they're defined somewhere else, and I just haven't seen it.
I don't think so. There are J9 treetop. Should be the common only.
But JProfiling code is not in OMR, is it? I thought it's OpenJ9.
Yeah, it is OpenJ9. Yeah. Yeah, because it does to, I guess the J profiling block can be moved to OMR because it doesn't do a specific J9 specific work, but the J profiling value does the J9 specific work, whether it is identifying the virtual cause or the check cast or instance of nodes. So that part is in OpenJ9 at this point.
Okay, so my suggestion is if you cannot figure out yourself how to create those empty CFGs and empty treetops, put a question in one of the Slack channels, OpenJ9 Slack channels, and I'm sure somebody from the optimizer team or whoever knows is going to answer.
Okay, perfect. And I guess the next agenda item is also something that I've been following. So on the PR, we recently had a review from Dan, and I'm currently working on trying to confirm that my build process, since I switched machines, is working correctly. I asked about how to get the debug build set up in general, and I was told that Philip was making a blog post on it.
Mm-hmm.
that blog post is not yet publicly available. And when I tried logging into the WordPress where he was asking for feedback and suggestions on it, I could not log into that WordPress using just the sign in with Google didn't work. So I could only view what was publicly available. So I guess I have to wait for that to become publicly available first.
Okay. So how much of the functionality is now in that PR?
So the functionality that's in that PR is a fair bit behind the internal functionality, but the internal functionality needs to be rebased on top of it. So if I remember correctly, that was handling more or less just the add, like the integer arithmetic stuff, and just basic calling of static methods that were compiled with MicroJIT. I don't think it had the stuff in it for calling other methods from within a MicroJIT compiled method yet.
How about the work on GCR? Is that
The
part of
GCR
that?
stuff
Yeah.
is in there, yeah.
Okay, good.
GCR stuff's in there. That's one of the reasons we need to rebase the internal stuff off of the
Mhm.
PR, because that GCR change is now behind the internal in terms of where it is in the Git history. So we want to rebase all of the internal work we've done on top of GCR.
Okay. So I'll try to find time and review this maybe early next week. At least the parts that I'm knowledgeable of. Of course, I may not
If I
review the
remember
entire thing.
correctly, in Dan's most recent review, he found some dead code in the interpreter, where we used to be having some explicit checks and some explicit helpers that were made for handling the extra to field. Some of those were changed to the extra field when they should have just been removed and replaced with the TR version previously. There's also a big section that was handling the extra to fields count that got switched over to just rechecking the extras count, which doesn't need to be there anymore, and doesn't even get reached either. It's just become completely cut off.
Okay, good. So by next meeting, I will definitely have reviewed this.
Awesome.
Okay, so we reached the end of our agenda. Any other business, any other topic that we want to discuss today?
Just wanted to ask Scott, like when you are creating, like what kind of a constraint you have in constructing objects such as like a treetop? I see there are a couple of constructor that just requires a compiler object.
So the big problem, or the constraint we have is essentially that MicroJIT is and needs to be using as few structures as possible to do its job. So there's probably a lot of things inside of Treetop, and I say probably because I haven't gotten a chance to figure out all of what Treetop does and what its responsibilities are. But essentially, we're trying to allocate as few data structures as possible, and we're trying to compile as quickly as possible. And one of the ways we were doing this, or one of the things we were relying on, is not making an intermediary language. So I'm hoping that there's a way to create treetops that are incredibly lightweight and do the bare minimum of what needs to be done for J profiling, because that'll only ever get passed as part of the CFG, the J profiling, and we won't be passing it around to the rest of the system.
So I guess it just contains the information mainly about the node and the previous and next treetops, like just what you need to construct a control flow graph.
Exactly.
Okay, so Okay, okay, yeah. I think, yeah, as Mary said, you can, I think the current structure we have for the treetop, you can use it maybe if you do want to use a lightweight. It has 3 fields. Rest of the functions you might not need, then you can just extract it out into a separate class with a MicroJIT. Yeah, it does not have any more complex information like node contains.
So looking at these fields, I see next in previous treetops and then node. Is node used in JProfiling anywhere?
Not exactly. For the block frequency, I guess you do not need to. You do not need to see a node. How are you gonna insert the block frequency counter? Is it gonna be like a assembly block that you just gonna? How does it work?
So what I'm thinking right now, because I haven't built it yet and gotten a full chance to look at the limitations of what I'll be able to do when this is called, but early on in MicroJIT, we do a pass over the bytecodes. And since MicroJIT is a templated compiler,
Yeah.
in that first pass, when we go over the bytecodes, I'm intending to mark the places that build the CFG and mark the places there that are likely to, or not likely to, but could have edges that need to be profiled. And then essentially in here, where in the J profiling block, I think down in perform, there's a section that inserts the edge for, let's see if I can find it here. It says add the actual counter to the block. And inside everything that happens after that, which if I am up to date is around line 990 in J profiling block CPP. There's a symbol reference that's gotten that we won't have. A treetop is gotten from is created from that symbol reference that creates an ink tree. Then they get the node from that tree, set it as profiling code, and they prepend it to the block. And then there's this ink static debug counter thing that's created. Assuming that debug counter thing that's created is not a thing that I need to create, then basically what I would be looking to do from a MicroJIT perspective is have some specialized version for MicroJIT of the either the treetop or the CFG block that's gotten here. When you add the counter to the block, where they do block prepend tree, have something like block set profiling or require profiling, and then it would just be flagged as this branch or this bytecode needs to have profiling. And then when we do the iteration in MicroJIT, when we're iterating over it, we would just peek for every branch. We'd look at an internal table or something and see, did we need a branch or branch profiling or a branch counter on that branch, and then generate it if we do before we generate the branch instruction.
Okay. Yeah. So the node, I don't think so. You need a node. It's just to add the. It's just there for the regular TR code gen.
Yeah, make sure to make that node null, just in case anybody uses. We want to crash fast rather than using garbage.
Yeah. So I notice here, looking at that exact thing, there's in this little section it says tree get node set is profiling code.
Yeah.
Is that where that happens on the node? Is there anywhere else where TR or rather the J profiling, because that's where we're going to be passing this.
So I guess the logic behind using that set is profiling code is to set a flag on that particular node. Later on, the optimizer would not do anything special, like would not try to optimize that part, or even if later on we, let's say for the J profiling value, or let's say if we do want to add this block frequency counter for the regular JIT compiler, but we want to patch it so that it's just there as a knob, and then later on we can patch it and make it actual profiling. This kind of a flag would help us identifying that later on, but apart it does not do anything special. It's just to tell the other optimizers that this node is a special, it's a profiling node, don't do anything special.
Okay, now I also noticed that JProfiling block is grabbing the CFG from the compilation object. Is there anywhere else in post-compilation tasks, since we're going to be building this thing up when we would otherwise, if this was TR, it would be a call to that compile inside of the wrapped compile function. So it's like the last thing that happens before post-compilation tasks. Is there anything else with the CFG that might get done after compilation that I might need to clean up and make sure the CFG doesn't exist for? I imagine not, because I'm imagining that the CFG not existing would cause an assertion failure, and I would have hit it already at this point. But I'm hoping to learn that now rather than later. Like if I just set comp flow graph to my CFG I make that doesn't have any IL in it and represents nothing, is something going to break?
I didn't quite understand what you said. So after the compilation is over, when we reach that point in post-compilation tasks, we shouldn't be touching anything from the compilation object except to destroy things, but we shouldn't be using anything from there.
Okay, so it should be safe to set the CFG inside that inside the MicroJIT function that calls into the MicroJIT compiler.
Yeah, at that point, yeah, nobody should be doing anything compilation-wise.
Okay, perfect. So then we won't have to do anything special there, like moving the acquisition, I guess would be the right word, moving the thing where we acquire the CFG out of perform. Like we won't need any refactoring there. That can just be as it is. All right. I think I have a pretty clear idea of what to do and how to do that now, and I'll probably have some more questions in the general chat over the next week or two, trying to figure out exactly how to create this empty, lightweight CFG. And there is one thing that I'm still kind of unclear on, but it's probably not a problem and not something I need to fix directly. But I don't understand looking at the J profiling block. Like I see how it sets counters, and I see how from the I profiler or previous profiling data, it decides whether it needs to add an edge or not. But I don't see how TR gets this profiling data. Is the count just in the code itself?
So I guess when you create the block frequency information, it contains it contains the bit vector to hold the information of how to get frequency of each block by adding certain counters or subtracting certain counters, and that information is stashed with bytecode info. So when the other compilation will construct the CFG and see the bytecode info, just queries the block frequency info. That if you have the block frequency or if you need to compute a block frequency for this particular block, just calculate it using the existing persisting information that is there.
So I guess more directly, my question is, where is the frequency for a given the counting is appended to the block, but if I remember correctly, we're profiling edges by counting edges, or are we profiling vertices by counting edges?
I guess we are profiling vertices by count. Yep. Sorry, I didn't get the exact question. Sorry.
Okay. So I guess more directly, my question is the edges that we're counting. Where are the counts stored? Because on a MicroJIT side, when I do this counting, I need to know where the count is to either set, like to either point at the address from inside my JIT code.
It's the block frequency info.
Block frequency info.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can find the class in the G9 profiler that holds the like a bit vector that holds the information about the CFG. So it knows, for example, there is a block X that you wanted to get a frequency from frequency of. It holds the information of which counters that it needs to add and subtract to get the exact frequency. And yeah, so you that information is in J9 profiler, and you can see some of the functions that are called from that class, such as a block get frequency for block or get frequency info, and you see how the frequency is being counted.
Okay, I see. So this is being done through the symbol reference table. So we don't use a symbol reference table. We've been just grabbing the actual addresses from the data structures.
I don't think so it's been used with this. You might need to make some changes there, but the only thing that you need is the bytecode info and call site info. And from the block frequency info, you can just calculate the frequency.
Yeah. So given that I have the block frequency info and I know the block, I should be able to get the block frequency for something. And then I'm willing to bet that if I look at this, that's that returns a pointer. Okay. So if that's returning a pointer, then I can just use a relative address to that pointer and then update it directly.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Right. Let me know if you have any other question or if you want to understand the algorithm, whatever information will help you.
Thank you. If I'll when I have more questions, not if, because I definitely will have more questions. But when I have more questions, I'll make sure to reach out in general, and I'll add you here as a teammate in the Eclipse OpenJ9. Oh, this
Sure.
is inviting people. This is okay. I think I just need to click on Open Direct Messages.
Okay, is there anything else that we may need to discuss?
No, I think I'm good on my end. I don't know about Harpreet. Do you have any questions, Harpreet?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I guess on the UMB side we're good. Are there any more questions from any of you guys at IBM?
Not from me. As I said, I'm going to review the PR and I may have questions then. Okay, then I can adjourn here. So thank you everyone for attending. I will have the recording for this meeting posted to the YouTube channel as soon as possible. I've never done that, so I may ask Dan or Randy to do it. And I hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time. Is that working out for you?
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect. Thank you very much.
then we'll stop here. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.